Age is but a number for the University of Toronto's youngest graduate, Sakina Rizvi. On this episode, we speak to Sakina about what drives her, her advice for her fellow peers, and her plans for the future. This is her story.
Education has been something that has been important in my family from the beginning. I remember when I was younger, convincing my parents to let me take a day off was like impossible unless I was super sick. And as I was going to school, seeing the impact that my teachers had on me was sort of when I realized how powerful education can be. And now that I'm doing my master's and sometimes I get a chance to go back to the school that I went to, and I see these young students and I see how open they are to receiving ideas and the power that a teacher can have in really helping a student grow academically and spiritually. When I was in high school, I had a really amazing principal. Her name was Miss Sarah, and when I saw the way that she also influences her students and how the way that she taught her students went beyond the academic standards and the academic guidelines, that was when I really realized that it's within education that I could really make an impact. And also I was also thinking about how education really shapes your worldview, especially in the younger grades when you're there. It really shapes how you look at certain things, how you view certain people. And so that I knew that if I really wanted to make a difference, that was the path that I should take. So I graduated high school at the age of 14, and I remember that I had started fast tracking when I was in grade 8. So the summer of grade 8, I took a course during the summer with one of my teachers. And so after that, I realized, I can handle this workload. And then when I went into grade 9, I continued to take more online courses. And then by the time, sort of at the end of grade 10, that was when I graduated. I remember along the way, I would get so many questions, and people would always wonder that, oh my God, you're going to be graduating at such a young age. And I think a lot of that was because what I was doing was so different, and what I was doing wasn't normal. And so many people were skeptical of the path that I had taken. And I think a lot of that is also because we're so trained that when we go to school, we expect that a student graduates at the age of 18, and then even from universities at the age of 22. I remember a lot of my friends would always joke with me and say, oh my God, you're just going to fast track through life. And after I graduated from high school and I started university shortly after, I told them, I said, okay guys, don't worry, I'm not going to fast track university. I'm going to take my time with this one. And then sort of one thing led to another, and I was able to get some petitions done within my university to allow them to let them take the courses that I needed to graduate a year earlier. And they were like, oh, see, we told you would do it. And I said, okay, in my master's, definitely this one, it's 2 years, so I've got to get it. I don't know how I'm going to fast track it. But alhamdulillah, one thing led to another, and I was able to do it in a year. I think when I had initially started to fast track, my parents were super supportive. We used to live in America before, and I was there until I was about 6 years old. And when I was younger, my mother had really worked hard with me on reading and writing skills. And so by the time that I went to JK, they were actually at that time really wanted me to go to SK. They wanted me to get to the next grade. And so they were always talking to school principals and administrators, and I was going through tests. And so this was something that they were really quite supportive of. And so alhamdulillah, that's something that really helped, that really pushed me. And as a kid, I remember thinking, oh my God, if I could just get done with school, it would be amazing. It was really appealing for me to say, wow, I'll be done 2-3 years earlier. I think this was a concern that a lot of people raised, more so when I was entering university. And because alhamdulillah, I have a really good set of high school friends, and even when we would talk about what I was doing and we would joke around about it, they were still very supportive, and I had a great sort of relationship with them. More of the concern was, okay, now when you leave these set of friends, how are you going to be able to connect to people that are much older than you? How are you going to be able to hold a conversation? And I think for me, when I entered university, really I wasn't necessarily going there just to make friends. I had a purpose there that, I want to get my degree, and at the same time, I thought, I already have these great group of high school friends and that I continued to remain in touch with even while I was going to the university. So I was blessed to be in an Islamic school that really helped me build a strong foundation for my Islamic principles, but also really pushed me towards academic excellence. I went to the school for about 8 to 9 years, and then I graduated at the age of 14, and then shortly after I started university. I remember that when I was fast tracking, I would always get a lot of questions. Questions like, why are you fast tracking? And what's the rush? Or won't you be too young when you go to university? And I think that the reason why I was getting those kinds of questions was because what I was doing was different. What I was doing was something that wasn't normal. And this made a lot of people skeptical of the path that I had taken. Many people were also concerned about whether I would be able to interact socially and other sorts of things related to that. However, I remember my first day of university quite well, and none of the issues that I faced or struggles that I had to do with my age. The struggles that I faced were more like finding the building that I had to get to on the first day of class, or finding a seat in a busy lecture hall, which I think are struggles that most first-year university students can relate to. As I continued to progress through my studies at university and continued to finish my courses, I think that I started to care less and less about my age, and it wasn't really something that was at the top of my mind. It really only came up when I had to get forms signed by my parents because I was younger than 18, or when my parents had to drop me off to the university because at the time I didn't have my license. So those were sort of the only issues that I faced because of my age. And so what I think is really important for us is that as Muslims, when we are making decisions, that we're really careful not to focus too much on basing them off of what other people are doing, or really thinking a lot about whether what we're doing has been done before. I think we've got to strive for excellence, and we've got to be leaders that are following in the footsteps of the Ahlulbayt. When I look back at my experience during my undergraduate degree and think about some of the things that I'm going through now as part of my master's, I think one of the things that has really helped me keep my iman and keep my faith has been having the right role models. Alhamdulillah, I have a really good group of friends, many of whom I've known for 10 years now, and they're always there to sort of listen to all the assignments that I have due, but they're also there to hear sort of any concerns that I have about a certain theory that I might be learning or something that I'm confused about. And so I always have the opportunity to send them a text and say, oh, hey, what do you think about this? Or, I learned this in class today. And we'll go back and forth, and that really allows us to have a good, productive conversation. And something that's really important to me is many of the friends that I have, they don't only care about my success in this dunya, in this world, but they're really looking to provide me with advice and guidance for what's going to help me in the next world as well. Alhamdulillah, I've also kept in touch with a lot of the teachers and scholars that had helped me in my high school years, and they've been very nice to be there to provide me with answers to the questions that I have. I think that often when we start university, as a student, regardless of the program that you're in, you're given so many different ideologies and perspectives, and you're told the views of famous academics and intellectuals. And often what ends up happening is that we place these individuals on really, really high levels, and we begin to view them as role models to the extent that we begin to mold and shape and reform our Islamic perspectives based on the ideas that they've created, often without even realizing. And so something that I've really had to remind myself as I've gone through my studies is to know that the Ahlulbayt are the people that I have to look up to as role models, and the other individuals that are really following their principles and are guiding others based on that. I think you really realize how strong your foundation is when you're tested. And so when I was given some of these perspectives and ideologies, there were times when I did question. But because I had the right role models, because I had people that I trusted and that were providing me with the right kind of guidance, I was able to go back and say, okay, this is where I'm getting confused a little bit, and ask a scholar or ask a friend, do you have the answer to this, or do you know what's going on? And then after that, I really sort of built on from that. When I think about what really helped me maintain my faith and iman, and what really helped me resist peer pressure while I was in university, it would definitely be the support system that I had. And that really starts from my family. My mother is probably the most hardworking person I know, and she's always been there to remind me to have breakfast before I leave, or to put my jacket on before I head out the door. But really, she's someone that I know that I could share anything that I'm struggling with, or maybe something that came up in university, and I know that the advice that she would give me would help me to make a choice that is not only good for, my well-being in this world, but also in the hereafter. And then similarly, my father has helped me in countless ways during my studies. He's always there to answer any questions that I have, and often while the rest of the family is sleeping upstairs, we'll be having long debates in the living room. And something that he's always told me, which I've really tried to sort of keep in mind as I continue to study, is to make sure that I have the correct lens when I'm analyzing issues, when I'm learning new topics, and that the lens that I have should be the one that's defined and outlined by the principles of the Ahlulbayt, and not, what I might be told in class, or what I might have been told by the media. My siblings have always been there to keep things light and give me a laugh. They usually come with my parents to pick me up when I go to university, or will stay up late at night and wait until I come home. But I think that's usually often an excuse just to stay up longer. And alhamdulillah, I've been super blessed to have amazing grandparents. I'll always tell them when I have a test or an assignment, and I'll say, please pray for me on this day. It's really important. And they'll often joke that, any success that you have is all because of the du'as that we do for you, and not because you're actually working. And so one of the first things that they'll often remind me of when I tell them that, I had this accomplishment, or I did amazing on that test that you prayed for me, is they'll say, did you thank God? Did you pray salah to thank Him? And that's something that I'm constantly mindful of. I think often as we get older, and especially when you turn the age of 18, there's a huge pressure for you to be independent and to distance yourself from your family. But for me, it's really because of the hard work and sacrifice of my parents and the people around me that I am the person that I am today. So there's been a couple of instances where, for a lot of my courses, sometimes at the end of the class, there'll be, an end of the course party where everyone will go to the pub and the bar. And as we're discussing it and everyone's excited that it's a final day, many people will say, you don't have to drink alcohol, just come and sit there, or just come and join us in this sort of gathering. And here again is why, I'll go back home and I'll discuss with people, with my friends, with my teachers, with my parents, and say, this is what everyone's talking about, this is what everyone's saying I should do, what do you think? And that really helps me sort of go back to my core Islamic principles and values. I think that oftentimes when we're put in situations where we have to explain our beliefs and values, or where we're not doing what everyone else is doing, we get quite uncomfortable, and it's not a sort of nice place to be in, and we shy away from it. However, I really think it could be a positive opportunity for you to teach someone something. I remember when I was graduating from my bachelor's degree, I was talking to my friends and some of the people that I knew at the university. They were saying, you've got to shake hands with the dean or the chancellor. Some of them were saying, it's just 2 minutes, just shake hands and walk away. Some of them were saying, wear winter gloves and do it. And then sort of after I discussed with the people that, I had in my family and some of the teachers that I had, I found that, if you stay true to the Islamic principles and values that you have, you can use this opportunity to say, hey, I don't do this because, within my religion, and then you can mention the reasons. And I've had, alhamdulillah, a lot of positive experiences when I have had the opportunity to talk to someone and to have a conversation, whether it's about the hijab, or whether it's about, why I'm not going to that class party. Oftentimes people just don't know. And when you step up and you take that chance to explain it to them, you actually make it easier for a lot of other Muslims, and you do something to help guide that person as well. For my bachelor's, I did it in religions.
Yeah.
And so I've had to take a lot of courses in which, you say, like, you talk about the feminist movement, and you talk about hijab and how hijab is bringing it down, and, things about how it's backwards and how so many women are, like, it just goes on and on and on. And sometimes when you look around you and you try to find a practicing Muslim that's academically successful, and people say, oh, they just don't exist. And that sort of sets this overall idea in society that you've got to compromise and you've got to shy away from your beliefs and put them on the side for you to really get somewhere. So that's something that I've wanted to challenge and wanted to say, I think a lot of the times Islam is the first thing that we compromise on. And I think this really has to do with making sure that we have the right lens and having the right role models as well. Sometimes we'll disregard certain aspects of Islam, and then what ends up happening is that we justify it and we put it under, we're being modern and we're being moderate, and then we're using the views of intellectuals that match with what we personally believe in and what we're comfortable with, but what may not be aligned with what we've been taught by the Ahlulbayt. And so in such conversations in my classroom, I'm always sort of trying to think about going back to your roots and thinking, okay, what are the guidelines? And using that as the base for how I should be understanding other things. I also think it's super important that we're honest with ourselves. And this is something that I personally constantly remind myself of, that even if it's one thing, to do something wrong, but to know that what you're doing is wrong. And when you have that kind of approach, then you can improve and you can get better, and there's a way for you to better yourself in that way. However, it's another thing when you're doing something wrong, but then you're trying to justify it, and that's where it gets really dangerous then, because really then you end up fooling yourself. And what I've always told myself and tried to remind myself of is that my iman and my faith has to be my top priority. I always sometimes when I'm, talking to my friends, I tell them that if after I've gotten all my degrees and when I'm done my education, if I've lost my faith, then I've paid a really big price for all of my accomplishments. I think to some extent we have to ignore what people think, especially in matters of faith. If we're adhering to the correct principles and if we're sincere in the manner in which we're following them, then inshallah Allah will give us opportunities to teach people and to guide people. But what we shouldn't be doing is, for the sake of being more approachable and for the sake of being more open, that we begin to dilute our own practices and we begin to try and make ourselves seem very appealing and acceptable for those purposes. So when I started fast tracking, and as I continued to do it throughout while I was at my university, one thing that I realized is that there's a lot of misconceptions. There's a lot of things that people think about fast tracking students. And so when I was deciding what I want to do for my PhD and what I want to focus on for my master's, I really wanted to study the concept of ability-based learning models and to design an educational system, or at least a set of policies that allow students to progress through the system at their own pace. Now, this doesn't mean that every single student is going to fast track and graduate at the age of 14. But if there is, for example, if there is a student that needs more time, they should be given that time. And in the same way that one who wants to fast track should be given the flexibility and openness to do so. Also, I think it's important for people to be aware that there are a variety of factors that have to be taken into consideration when a student wants to fast track. It's not like you look at a student and say, oh, you're smart, this is good for you. You have to look at personal, social, behavioral maturity, academic work ethic. And after evaluating all of those things, then you can say to a student, you're really capable of this. Push yourself, challenge yourself to excel. I think that in the current education system that we have now, it's quite rigid and quite structured in making sure that students graduate at the age of 18 from high school and at 22 from bachelor's degree programs. And they do have academic and applied courses in high school to cater to the different abilities, and they also have IEPs. But really, I think that by introducing an ability-based learning model and by pushing this idea that age is not the only marker of intellectual potential, that it would really help both students that need to be challenged and need to finish their education at a faster pace, and also those that could use that extra time to solidify their concepts. Inshallah, in the future, I do hope to open a consulting company that can work with school boards and teachers in training them how to implement such an ability-based learning model to allow a variety of students to reach their potential. looking back, when I think about my experience as an undergraduate, I think about some of the things that I wish I would have known. And so now for people that are going into university or maybe are still in high school, a couple of things that I think are super important is firstly for them to have a really strong foundation for the Islamic principles and beliefs. Because once you get into university, you're given so many different ideologies and perspectives, and the only way that you can really get through while still holding on to those values is if you have built that really strong foundation. And the second thing that's really helped me is choosing my friends wisely. When I'm talking to someone, I don't only talk to them, because it's fun. I've also got to think, is this person going to be honest with me? How does this person help me, when I'm doing something wrong? And when you have those sorts of people that are caring for your dunya and your akhirah, that's when you can really improve and really better yourself. And the third most important thing that I still have to remind myself of this as I continue to study, is to have trust in Allah. I think that at various stages in our lives, things happen and we don't quite understand why. Or we do every single thing that we're supposed to do and still we don't get the result that we're hoping for. And so I've really always had to remind myself to be content with the situation that I've been put in, and to have trust that Allah does have a plan for me and that He is guiding me throughout the way.